Welcome everyone to breakout session group 3.1 on tapping into digital opportunities to improve forest learning. We're still adjusting the groups, I guess. My name is Thomas Choka. I'm with CIFOR-ICRAF based in Nairobi, Kenya. So we'll walk you through the session today. We will have 4 presenters with different topics. This is the second iteration of this particular breakout group. Yesterday we had 3 presenters talking about experiences in teaching online from the university perspective. One was from the University of British Columbia, the other one a partnership project between a university in Germany and one in Kenya. And then a presentation was presented from Brazil on more current digital tools and opportunities for forest education. Today, as I said, we will have 4 presenters with projects and tools developed by the respective organization, one from Finland, and we have 2 examples from Central Africa, and one from traffic focusing on the Asia Pacific region, if I'm not mistaken. The breakout group was designed to look at all these opportunities that digital tools will provide or can offer for forest education, especially now faced with the COVID-19 pandemic. So the session was designed to discuss relevant information on how to utilize these digital tools as online courses, as well as different types of software applications to help improve the forest learning and education. The session will be most useful for those interested in employing useful and suitable media to disseminate and promote current efforts in the provision of inclusive and up-to-date forest learning in a global setting. So the examples that we're going to be listening today are a proof of that ambition. We're addressing 3 major guiding questions during this breakout session. One is looking at the current efforts and the lessons learned to promote digital tools for improving forest learning. We want to look at the needs and the gaps in using such tools for students and young professionals. And thirdly, we would like to see how these changes of technology in this rather unprecedented situation of the pandemic can suit for the current forestry sector development. But before we start, let me remind you, as Emma just mentioned earlier, the call to action. The link should be in the chat. Call to action on forest education, which was a culmination of an 18-month effort by the Global Forest Education Project to help assess the status and needs of forest education training and knowledge. The call was launched at the beginning of the conference. It is a collective appeal urging immediate action to strengthen forest education, capacity development, knowledge sharing worldwide. So please encourage you to visit the conference website and check out the call and sign it if you feel you want to support this effort. So now lead me over to the 4 presenters for today's session. So the first presenter, Jenny Sivanen-Rahijärvi from Finland. She's a project manager at Forest Education Engineers, PI. It's a network for professionals and corporations in the bioforest industry based in Finland. One of the flagships of PI is a product called Forest Biofacts, which is, as you can see in the title of the presentation, it's a novel digital learning environment. In her presentation, Jenny will talk about Forest Biofacts, which was developed in collaboration with the Finnish University Network and numerous industry partners. The environment covers topics on forest-based products and technologies from various viewpoints. It serves the needs of universities and companies working in forest-based industries. So welcome, Jenny. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Okay, can you now hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you, Jenny.
Good. Hello, so my name is Jenny Sievinen-Rahiari, and I work for Finnish Forest Products Engineers Association. And I'm really glad to be here today to share a few thoughts about the digital learning possibilities in forest education with you and share our ideas on our digital learning environment, Forest Biofacts. Shortly, it's just a few words about our association. So Finnish Forest Products Engineers Association is a network for students, professionals and companies of forest sector. Our aim is to make connections between people, between companies and between different organizations. So we organize different types of events, webinars, seminars and students events. We make connections between educational institutes and industry or the companies there. We do brand marketing to attract young talents to the forest sector and also encourage young talent in the beginning of their career, for example, by mentoring, and also grant scholarships for students and researchers. One of our really important tasks since the beginning of our long history has been to enhance the competence of our members. The next slide, please. Thank you. To enhance the competence of our members and moreover people in general working in the industry. We have a long tradition in publishing educational materials dating back almost 100 years. And traditionally, naturally, those materials have been printed books. But a few years back, we started a new project to create a new digital learning environment covering the forest-based products, technologies, and raw materials. The new learning environment is based on our papermaking science and technology book series, which is widely adopted by universities and professionals worldwide. These books were first published around year 2000 and have been already once updated. By that time, we added PDF book and ebook versions, but those were really static copies of the printed books. The forest industry has gone through drastic changes within the last decade, and it was again time to update and renew the material for better serve the needs of the universities and professionals. It was clear from the really beginning of our project that we won't be doing another set of printed books, but instead we needed something totally different. So Forest Biofacts was launched by the end of last year. And we did not, as I said, we did not want to make it static and as a copy, but something that can be constantly developed and created and kept up to date with the changes in the industry and changes with the needs of educators and professionals. So we launched at the end of last week, but already during this year, during the spring, we have released two new sections for the material, and we also have started a webinar series which acts as a way to present the material in the learning environment, and these are free for everyone to join. But also this will be added to the learning environment to bring new perspective on the written material. So will be presented as a video content there. Okay, but then for the next slide, I'd like to share a few words about what is Forest Biofacts exactly. So it is a digital learning environment planned for professionals and students in the forest-based bioeconomy. It is a large entity covering the whole value chain from forest-based products to technologies and sustainable forest management. The content has been divided into 16 different themes, which contain over 1,500 articles of academic content and supported with additional materials such as videos. In videos, we have expert interviews, process videos, and you can even take a virtual tour to paper mill with a virtual classes if you want to. The content was planned and created in close collaboration with industry and universities, and we have had over 150 contributors taking part on this project as writers, editors, and technical support. And besides the more academic content that is targeted for students and professionals already in the industry, the learning environment also contains a free introduction to forest-based bioeconomy theme that is targeted for wider audience, especially for high school students. We, for example, use this in our brand marketing to attract youngsters to the industry, to forest studies. This introduction theme gives an overview on the possibilities of forest-based bioeconomy and its role in solving global challenges. It has content from sustainable forest management to products and technologies. And it also covers study and career opportunities, study opportunities, especially, of course, or not of course, but unfortunately more in the Finnish perspective. So for the next slide, I'd like to present the 16 different themes of the forest biofacts that cover the whole value chain of forest-based bioeconomy. It has themes about the products, technologies, raw materials, and supportive functions. I mentioned earlier that the content is based on our previous book series, but there is also a lot of new content, for example, textile applications, food products applications, nanomaterials, and energy and biofuels. I won't go through to this all in detail, but I have highlighted a few of the themes. So first, there is this introduction to forest-based bioeconomy theme that can be that is free for all of you to visit and have a look, and it gives an overview on the forest industry. And another one that I like to point out is the forest and other biomass resources theme, which gives you an overview of forest ecosystems, properties of wood, global forest resources, and sustainable forest management. And besides these 16 themes, Forest Biofacts also contains a 6-language dictionary on board and paper making, a glossary of common terms, and the whole papermaking science and technology book series as a PDF book. So this is really a massive content of material. And then to address all the questions that were pointed out for this breakout group, I have gathered a few of the project guidelines and learnings that we have gained during the project and in the planning of the project. And these have really ensured us the usability of the learning environment. As mentioned earlier already, we did this in a really close collaboration with universities and companies that they were really in a strong role already in the development phase. And the content has been created so that it really serves the need for both of these groups. And this also enabled us that already by the launching, we had a steady user group for this project or this product and the learning material. What cannot be pointed out too much is the importance of user experience testing. And we did this really systematic testing throughout the project, both in the content and the platform wise. And this really gave us really important information on how the material was accepted and what are the points that we need to put our efforts on developing it to more easier and more user friendly. Our target group is really large, so it's from university students to professionals in companies. And the needs for these groups is really different for this material. So as it needs to be served as a learning material for students, the need for professionals is totally different. They use it more like a handbook to easily find and faster, like targeted answers to their questions. So it needs to fulfill a variety of different needs of the users. And therefore, we needed to make a system that is easily to adopt it to variety of different learning management systems. So every organization have their own, or not everyone own, but there are many learning management systems, and this needs to be easily adopted to all of these. So we wanted to make a system that doesn't have any restrictions on the adaptation for different learning management systems. Forest Biofacts is really easy to use, and it is easy to access. We don't need, you only need an internet access, no special programs or no special application, and it can be reached everywhere where you have internet access and with any device, desktop computers, mobile or tablet. And also, what is really important, was important to us, that the format is something that allows us to easily update and keep the material updated and easily to develop further. So in a way, for this type of learning material, we have thought that in a best case or worst case scenario, within 10 years, this might be something totally different. It doesn't need to resemble anything that it is today, but we can create the content all the time to the way that it best serves the need of the users. But if you want to hear more, I will be gladly answer questions, and you can contact me later on. You can visit our website forestbiofacts.com, and I also encourage you to order our newsletter, which gives you also information on our upcoming webinars. Next one is already next week, and please join our webinars for more information, and also visit the site. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jenny, for the very interesting presentation about your learning platform. Looking at the history, I guess there was a lot of work that went into it, ensuring that all aspects on the technical side as well as on the learner side have been addressed. So would be curious to learn more about it when I'm be able to access or use it. We will have a discussion around after the 4 presentations, so folks can raise them during the discussion or put them in the chat box of the Zoom app. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Our next presenter is Claude Kachaka. He's a professor at the Faculty of Agronomic Sciences at the University of Kinshasa. He serves as the regional coordinator of REFEAC since 2015. REFEAC is a network of Central African forest and environmental training institutions, a collaboration platform of forestry and environmental training institutions in Central Africa. It was established in 2001 and became a member of COMIFA, Forest Commission of Central Africa, in 2006. The objective of REFEAC is to develop the skills and structures necessary for the joint and sustainable management of environmental and forest resources. In his presentation, Claude will provide an overview of REFEAC. He will describe an e-learning project implemented as part of the REFEAC partnership with GIZ. And he will conclude his presentation with a few lessons learned in employing e-learning and the challenges faced when using digital learning in forest education. Thank you. The floor is yours, Claude. Claude, your mic is muted.
Ah, ok. Maintenant, non, c'était le présentateur qui m'a coupé.
Now
Ok,
it's
je recommence. Je m'appelle Claude Kachaka. Je suis
My name is Claude Kachaka. I am the coordinator of REFAC, which gathers 28 forestry and agronomic institutions in Central Africa. And we are present in 9 countries: Burundi, Cameroon, Comores, Gabon, Equatorial Guinea, the Central African Republic, the RDC, Rwanda, and Chad. We are in charge of ensuring transversal access to forestry planning, strengthening of capacities, training, and communication all around forestry. Now, this project is part of Section 4 of a project on forestry and environmental training. And our goal is to support the member associations of REFAC to modernize, to harmonize, and to improve the training, particularly distance learning. Now, we work with GIZ, and we have a server in Germany, and there are around 15 lessons on this platform. And we also have a consultant who trains the teachers involved in this project. And this consultant is assisted by IT managers who ensure the maintenance of the platform and help the teachers to produce their online classes. Now, the first phase of the project was to create the content of the lessons and then train teachers who could use this material. And then we wanted to support the teachers in the implementation of this e-learning program. In terms of our progress between 2018 and 2019, the first and second phases were implemented. And then in 2020, with the emergence of COVID,
Can you lower your video, please, so we can see your full face? It's important for the interpretation. Yeah, that's
Sinon, ma
wonderful.
vidéo est
Merci.
activée.
that's it. We can see you. Yes, that's perfect. Thank you. Thank you very much, Claude.
Ok. Alors, je disais,
So I was saying that that in 2020, with the emergence of COVID-19, phase 3,
qui concernait la
which
l'utilisation de coûts produits, s'est poursuivi en ligne.
was support for the product, this was moved online.
Alors, à ce jour, il y a au moins une
Now, to date, there are 15 classes which are accessible on the platform, hosted in Germany. And then we have summer classes as well, 8 classes, which are scheduled to take place between August 2021 and March 2022.
Maintenant, nous sommes en pourparlers pour la
And at the moment, negotiations are underway to see whether some of the teaching can return to being in person.
là où je présente quand même la plateforme.
And I think the next slide is where I show the platform. Here we are. This is the online learning platform. This is the REFAC online learning platform. Next slide, please.
Slide suivant. OK.
Thank you.
Oui. Et l'autre slide, j'ai déjà présenté ça.
I've already shown this. Oh, no, I haven't shown this slide. Right, so this is how we maintain the site. This is the third part of my presentation, how we maintain this site. So since August 2020, REFAC has been receiving funding from the French Development Agency. And through this funding, we are able to maintain our ATIBT and REFAC websites. And our goal is to increase the visibility of our activities and disseminate the products easier. And our goals. So we want to produce a newsletter. And this actually has already been produced. We want to correct and add extra functions to the site. We want to produce and maintain and keep the documentation up to date and train and support a technical team in how to use this and administrate this website. Next slide, please. So what have we learned and what are the challenges? Well, with regards to the process, we've had support from GIZ. They provided the server and also this external expertise. And at the end of the project, REFAC will be responsible for the project. And REFAC's role was to mobilize teachers in these various institutes because the idea was to change the culture from in-person lectures to this online learning. And the project was organized into two sections. Part was in-person learning and part was online learning. And it's important to have both online and in-person sessions. Now, the teachers in the different centers had to adapt to this new digital culture and adapt their teaching material and methods. We also had to manage the impact on the time required to prepare lessons because this is this new digital culture. And the various skills required are acquired through the project because we have teachers who are creating modules and others who are using the modules. And the number of teachers who are using the program is growing. Next slide, please. So in terms of product use, we have Moodles and we have different types of training material. We have initial training and then ongoing professional development training. Now, it's expensive to access these tools, and it's not very accessible for REFAC, for the member institutions, or for students. So in terms of the longevity of the project, it's a very expensive project. It's not very accessible. So one of our challenges is to get high-speed access to the internet. We have problems with electricity supply. Some organizations have to use generators, and the costs of diesel or the use of solar energy. And then the maintenance of these digital tools requires people with extensive qualifications, and these are expensive, and they're expensive people to find. Next slide, please. So I'd like to thank you for your attention, and I'm at your availability if you have any questions after the 4 presentations. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup. It was a very interesting presentation about an exciting project in e-learning. It allows, it looks that RIFIA can expand its outreach in training and education, but we've seen the challenges that you are facing, things that have been addressed yesterday as well in terms of the technical infrastructure, access, but also the costs involved in using such an online system, both on the provider side, but as well as especially on the learner side. We will capture those and hopefully discuss them later in the discussion and the discussion round after the presentations. Thank you. Our next presentation is made by Chan Hing Keong. Sorry if I mispronounced your name. He serves as the Senior Advisor for Forest Governance and Trade at Traffic. Traffic is a non-governmental organization working globally on trade in wild animals and plants in the context of both biodiversity conservation and sustainable development. Chan has over 20 years of experience working on conservation and environmental issues globally. At Traffic, his work focuses on issues such as illegal logging, timber supply chain transparency, and forestry governance. In his presentation, Chan will provide an overview of the work of Traffic. He will describe the use of online learning tools employed by Traffic. He will conclude his presentation addressing some of the lessons learned and the possible challenges faced when using digital learning in forestry education. So very much complementing what we've listened just before from RIFIA. Thank you. So the floor is yours, Chan. Please go ahead. Chan, I think you are muted. Can you unmute your mic, please?
Okay.
Now
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, the host did not allow me to unmute. My apologies. Yeah. No, thank you, Chair, for introducing me and Traffic. I will be bringing a different perspective, I think, to our discussion today, because I'll be looking at it from the NGO perspective in terms of how we approach the training to this particular sector in particular, but in the broader training arena that we do with regards to wildlife trade. We also do, obviously, a more formal training where possible, and we do have a collaboration now with RIFIA to try and bring the trainings we have done to the classroom setting, basically the more formal sector. So that will be hopefully developed further in the coming months and years. So what I will do is just to give you an understanding of the way we actually think through our training needs and how we want to approach it. Next slide, please. Right. Now, Now, it is important, at least from our perspective as an NGO, that we have a goal in mind when we develop training materials. And that really brings us back to the mission of Traffic, basically, as you introduced, Chair, that our mission is to ensure that the trade in wild plants and animals and its habitats are conserved and traded sustainably. And the species that are being traded is not detrimental to the survival of species in the wild. So that is a goal that we have. Next, please. And when we look at the training materials that we develop then, because our goal is about trade, the changes in the trade to make sure that conservation is conserved, the species are conserved, habitat is protected. We have to look at, obviously, from the source and producers, obviously, the processors, manufacturers, and the markets and consumers. So we are actually looking at the entire supply chain. And that's why traffic is found in all those regions and countries, because the trade moves across borders. So you need to be able to place in context before you can actually conduct your training. Next, please. And for that, we also look at the focus of our training, obviously, and we look at the levers of change that we are involved in trying to make that change towards conservation and sustainable resource use. Obviously, the foundation for our work are the international national laws that governs, manage, and controls the species and the products in trade. Because we have to follow the laws, obviously, right? Everyone should follow the national laws, right? But does everyone in the supply chain, when you're overseas, basically, knows and values the laws and the regulations of the countries you buy from, or the country that is transiting, where the product is transiting? And that is why we have compiled a lot of national legality frameworks for various tropical timber producing countries and wildlife producing countries in general. So the framework on legality is the one that we then convert into training tools for different target groups, because each of the target groups, the government agencies, and we are talking about different government agencies, the private sector as well, NGOs, academia, and others as well, know what is a responsibility towards legality. And the trade is also important to engage with the business community. So we actually look at code of conduct, because that is part of the corporate social responsibility initiatives. And that is one way that the businesses can ensure legality and sustainability. So we work with timber and wildlife industry associations to develop COCs, code of conduct, and the corresponding training and guidance needed, because you can't have one without the other. Market demands is another area that we work on well. And this can be a powerful driver for change, because you have to engage consumers and industry to increase transparency and legality in the management of the species and products, because that can allow you to leverage for change back upstream to the source. If consumers and industry buy legal instead of illegal products, then that will be a big leverage for change. Trainings, reduction, demand reduction campaigns, and the use of behavior science can help to refine and make this change. And it's important about behavior change because we are talking about attitudes, motivations, and that may require specific interventions, messages to actually make that change. So that is another area of training that will be very useful to engage in. And obviously we are talking about trade. So trade crosses borders. So we need international cooperation among enforcement agencies, but also private sector because of the supply chain, complexities of supply chains and the stakeholders, the various stakeholders that are there. They need to increase knowledge, capacity, information exchange among all these stakeholder groups to combat illegality and promote legal trade in wildlife. And we also work closely with CITES, the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species, or wild flora and fauna, right? Because they look at sustainability of international trade in species and to protect endangered species. Next, please. Now, it is obvious that when we know what we want to train, we have to figure out what we need to put into the training. And based on that, you definitely need good data and information. You need research, you need good timely research, up-to-date research and analysis, because the research might not show much, but it's the interpretation of the results that's going to be important. And all these have to be packaged into the guidance that we want to provide to the different stakeholder groups. And we are supportive of those target stakeholders. We work with them to make sure that we know their needs and they know their needs basically, so that we can cater to their needs. Next, please. Now, I mentioned a lot about stakeholders because if we do not know our audience, then it's actually going to be very difficult for us to make sure that our products, the training materials, can be of value to them. Let us look very quickly at this model value chain, right? It's very simple. In reality, there could be much more complexities to the supply chain itself, to the value chain. But you can see that the diversity of entities involved in any supply chain, because it goes all the way back to the forest, right? So the training materials, the capacity building approaches, tools, all have to be targeted for the specific stakeholder groups. It's not a one-size-fits-all. Now, the core actors, the column on the left, they are the ones that actually handle the species and the products that comes from the forests and the resource. For example, the logs, the sawn timber, plywood, moldings, and so on being transformed as it moves along the supply chain. Right? So we need to be able to know what are their needs and what changes we want them to effect. Then there is a supporting actors, because we are talking about big items, logs, even wildlife. You need transport. It could be maritime to the sea, air, road, rail, and you need money basically to make everything flow, right? And then there's a risk to be handled through insurance. And then you might have special equipment needs to load and unload your products and so on, right? You have to look at the markets and consuming countries, because there's increasing need for certification, because they need the confidence in legality and sustainability. And then you have to take a look at the external influences. Politics plays a part because they develop the policies and the legislations that actually affects management and trade, right? And then there's all the other influences that you can look at. So what is it that we want to train? Who we want to train? Next, please. Now, once we have the goal, the context, we are talking about the information analysis, we have identified the stakeholder groups or subgroups, it's not homogeneous even at the stakeholder group level. We'll have to put it into our training tools and materials. And these are some of the tools that we have used in traffic, right? E-learning courses, including the assessments, remote presentation, training videos, downloads of presentation of PDFs, selected languages, because we are talking about different cultures, languages, and the norms. And we have to make sure that it is done and developed in conjunction with the stakeholders to fit their needs, and to ensure the ability to provide training sustainably themselves, right? Because we are an NGO, it is up to them, either the government, private sectors, and others, to actually use the tools, and we need to make sure that they can do that. But we also have to bear in mind that longer workshops may be appropriate for certain audiences and materials. So online training is only suitable for some selected groups and for certain targets, for certain messages you want to do, certain changes we want to make, at least from our perspective. Next, please. And for example, we have done a lot of work with aviation industry. And obviously, when we talk about aviation industry, we are talking about like the ground handlers, the cabin crews, the X-ray, the customs, the airport security, and all that. So there are various trainings that can be done. You can do e-learning, 1 hour trainings, toolbox talks, and various other things. And you can have physical training as well. Next, please. Now, we started developing giving trainings from the physical sessions. And obviously with COVID, that has rapidly transferred over into online training. Now, for longer training sessions, obviously, we can have field-based practical hands-on sessions. But this now we have to change, obviously. Replace with games, questions, answers, discussions, and so on. Training our trainers is always very useful, whatever training tools we use, so that the people who can go to the training can actually bring it back and do their own training in-house. Resources have to be available for downloads. There are many resources, handbooks, manuals, briefing tools, and so on. We have to develop those. Right? And you need actually good trainers, because engagement is under. I can see you, you might be able to see me, but I can't see you. I cannot judge how everything is going. Am I going too fast or too slow? No. Are you having your coffee instead of listening? But at least if it's recorded, it will still be useful. What we have learned actually, I do not know now whether you're seeing this presentation and this whole conference through a laptop, a handphone, or a tablet. Large fonts is easy. I try to make my fonts as large as possible, because if you're on a handphone, you will have difficulty even seeing this, right? Use as few words. And even then, as you can see, it's difficult, right, to try and condense everything, because there's a lot we want to share. We have to keep sessions short so that we can engage with you better, hopefully. Next. And there are many challenges that you can see. We have to target the training materials. We have to know who we are going to target. Is it decision makers, management, middle level officers, technicians, and so on? The minimum for us has to be legality, because if you cannot verify legality, then that's going to be very tricky to ensure that you can actually be sustainable. And obviously for trainers, we have to practice and practice and practice to keep it in time. And even now I'm over time slightly. My apologies, Chair. And formal education is not the best approach for many of the target groups that we work with in traffic. And we have to be efficient and engaging, because there is no feedback from audiences in general. So I look forward to discussions in our breakout groups. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, everyone. And stay safe.
Thank you, Chan, for this very exciting presentation and the efforts traffic is making to broaden its training interventions, reaching to a very large range of stakeholders, which I assume is a huge challenge to get content adapted and prepared for the different user groups in a way. It was interesting to see that, like yesterday, the issue of length or the exposure to online learning needs to be addressed in the sense that people are not overwhelmed by being online too long. So it's good to see that this is reflected here. We can further discuss this after the last presentation. So now I'm leading over to Elise Mazerac, who will present an example of their work of the AREFAC project. Elise serves as the AREFAC project manager at ATIBT, which is an international technical tropical timber association. The project aims to set up a sustainable system of continuing training in the forest wood sector in the Congo Basin in the service of sustainable forest management. The project is implemented by support from RIFEAC. Claude is a representative of it in association with ATIBT. In her presentation, Elise will briefly introduce ATIBT. She will describe the AREFAC project and the use of digital learning opportunities in supporting the development of continuing education for the forest and wood sector in Central Africa. Similar to the previous presenters, she will conclude her presentation with several lessons learned and the possible challenges faced when introducing digital learning in forest education. Thank you. The floor is yours, Elise.
Merci beaucoup, merci pour cette présentation. J'espère.
And thanks for introducing me. I hope everyone can hear me well. I'm Elise Mazerac. I work for ATIBT. Next slide, please. The ATIBT is the International Technical Tropical Timber Association, founded in the 1950s at the request of the FAO and OECD, precisely to work on tropical timber and its trade and ensure that it will be legal, promoting sustainable management of the forests. ATIBT is both... Oh, the sound is extremely poor. Members of ATIBT include governments, international organizations, and NGOs. We have researchers and other institutions, and the ATIBT is a platform for exchange when it comes to the tropical timber trade, and it seeks to promote the sustainable management of the industry and ensure the purchase of legal wood and ecosystem services essential for the countries producing this resource.
Maybe speak a little bit slower so they can follow your speech. Thank you.
Désolée.
I do apologize, says the speaker. The ATIBT is a technical and scientific organization when it comes to wood resources and has provided a number of studies and documents, guidelines and tools on the wood resource, and we would invite you to read about all this on the ATIBT website and the chat. Go and take a look at what we produce in terms of documentation. The ATIBT is also an organization that develops and manages a number of programs and international projects, including the AREFAC project. Next slide, please. Thank you. The ADIFAC project is funded by the French Development Agency, and we work with RIFIAC. You heard from that speaker just previously. It's managed by ATIBT, and we have mixed management between the institutions and the tropical wood trade. The objective is to accompany development and ongoing training in forest and wood sector in Central Africa. This is a project that takes place in 4 countries in Central Africa and seeks to bring around the table training institutes in the sector, also companies from the private sector, major industrial companies or artisanal companies or SMEs in the different countries, so that they can work together on development and ongoing training, co-constructed by all of the actors in the sector, meeting the needs when it comes to employment and demand on the part of professionals in the sector. ADIFAC started in 2020, in April 2020, right in the middle of the pandemic, and it was possible to raise a number of issues relating to the digital sphere, online training, and all of the digital tools. In the framework of implementation of such projects, we haven't quite implemented digital activities yet, but for a year we've been looking at what's been done with regard to other projects. We've been exchanging with companies in terms of training, as well as training institutes when it comes to ongoing training. And we've looked at a number of challenges that need to be taken into account when working out how to use digital tools in training. Next slide, please. When we talk about digital opportunities, there are a number of possibilities that have lots of different advantages. I'm going to talk only about ongoing vocational training, but there is also everything that has to do with e-learning and mentoring. There are things that can be used such as MOOCs, during which students are given a certain degree of independence and can work at their own pace. There are some students who are monitored closely, and then also there's the importance of face-to-face learning and blended learning. That can also be interesting because it makes it possible to link up, or rather be together to learn. In the ADIFAC project, for example, we develop ongoing vocational training. We've got the issue of practical work, technical skills. It's hard to access all of that remotely. We realize that there are limits to e-learning, and we really do need to be careful about what we propose online and what can be developed online and what can't. Digital tools are tools that can improve ongoing vocational training with the use of classroom or training tools that can be supported and that can improve all of the training mechanisms used. And then there are also the more traditional tools used in online classes. We are also thinking about webinars. very interesting tools, but we need to think about the target audience, who's it for, why we organize such events in the framework of a project such as ADIFAC. And then there are lots of tools which are increasingly useful. We said yesterday, some 4 billion people have access to internet via their mobile phones or computers. They can look at videos, they listen to podcasts, they can watch cartoons, and all of those tools need to be taken into account when we are providing ongoing training. They're very useful tools. Then, of course, there are tools used by professionals, digital tools used by professionals when it comes to digital cartography, the management of images taken by drones, for example, database management, and so on and so forth. All of these are increasingly used in companies in Central Africa, in this case, and training in the use of these tools is very important, and it's going to be increasingly important when it comes to the management of tropical forests. And then with that whole range of tools, digital tools and opportunities available, we've learned a number of lessons similar to those presented previously. Next slide, please. These are lessons learned in terms of challenges. Looking at the green box on the bottom right of the slide, all of the technical and infrastructure challenges, that's been recalled on a number of occasions, but it's important to underline that, particularly when we're developing ongoing vocational training for people who work in companies, a number of whom aren't necessarily connected to reliable energy supplies. So access to energy and electricity can be difficult sometimes and costly. Then there are the costs of internet communication. It's not always easy to gain access to the internet in the forest. This needs to be taken into account. And then, of course, the costs related to technical tools and infrastructure. There was something that was mentioned previously, the management and maintenance of digital tools. You need IT skills or IT experts. Those are very specific skills, and they can be costly as well for training institutes in Central Africa if they want to deploy all of these digital means. And then there's, from the side of the learners or the trainees, there's the issue of technical skills and abilities of the young generation, and then the cost when it comes to access to internet and materials. Good tablets, good portable computers with antivirus software, etc. And then we've got the presence and participation of people online, people using online tools. There are the risks when it comes to dropout. We really need to think about what's in place to counter all of these risks. Another important point is also the target public in companies in this sector. There's not necessarily a high level of digital literacy, enabling these people to feel comfortable with all of these tools, with these online collaborative tools. Obviously, things are improving, but these are parameters that need to be taken into account, particularly when it comes to training for forest personnel in the forest. Digital literacy is very important. And then from the trainer's side, moving from traditional classroom-based teaching to online teaching, whether or not it's 100% or whether or not it's blended, that's a challenge for them. It's a teaching challenge, and you can't underestimate the adaptation time necessary, the training requirements as well that need to be managed. Also, when it comes to digital literacy on the part of the trainers, I'm thinking in particular about people with technical skills in this forest sector. They might not necessarily be using digital tools on a day-to-day basis. And so this can really be or represent a significant gap or a significant challenge. Also important, and something I'd like to underscore here, is the problem of access to online scientific publications and resources for training organizations and institutes and trainers in Central Africa. Accessing online journals and scientific reviews can be costly. And that access is frequently extremely difficult in training sectors in Central Africa. Universities in Europe have huge digital libraries and there's easy access to reviews and publications, but this is very complicated in schools and universities in Central Africa. And then from the organizational side, we've got the need for new materials, software updates, I do apologize, relating to IT and technological developments. And then of course, the related training required. There's also the level of digital literacy needed to accompany trainers and teachers when it comes to using digital tools. And then of course, the costs generated for those training institutes moving from traditional education to online education, that is the purchasing costs, the purchases of licenses and updates, and so on. All of these are necessary and important, but they represent genuine costs for the institutes that can't always afford them. I'll stop there. I'd like to thank you very much, and I'll be delighted to take part in the ensuing debate. Thank you.
Thank you, Elise, for this very interesting presentation. It shows that digital tools provide an opportunity to expand the learning efforts and continuing education in your work area. It was interesting to see that digital tools that are being used at the workplace can be incorporated in such an effort, something that has been addressed in a presentation that we listened to yesterday. Now that we have finished our 4 presentations, for those interested, the links to the organization or the learning environments are available in the chat. The presentations will be made available by the presenters at some point after the conference, I assume. So now I open up the floor for discussion and questions, comments from the audience, from you all. We had 3 questions. I guess the first question was sufficiently addressed in terms of the lessons learned from all these different projects that were presented. Like yesterday, some of the issues or the gaps and needs that were mentioned are the costs involved in setting up such environments and the skills and the infrastructure needed to support it. So if anyone has a question, please either put it in the chat or raise your hand. please go ahead. Any questions, comments? Maybe I can start. There was a question about accessibility early in the chat. It was addressed to the first presenter on forest bioeffects, but accessibility applies, I guess, to all of the 4 examples that we listened to. So maybe you want to address that in terms of how open the materials are, enrolling in courses and so forth. Thank you. Jenny, maybe. Please unmute your mic if you want to respond. Okay.
Okay, now it's
Yeah, it should be.
unmuted. Yeah, sorry. Yeah. Yeah, I know. It's also easy to use this technology. No, but yeah, the accessibility I didn't mention in my presentation, but for this learning environment, it is possible to purchase access rights either in the separate sections, these different themes, or then for companies, universities, organizations, we offer a license for this complete set of material. And then, of course, you can get just a preview for the material by visiting the website, and the introduction part is there free, and also the first pages or the introduction pages for all the different teams can be visited without any need of any cost, but also any need of any other material than the internet access. But yeah, did that answer to the question?
Elise or Chan, Claude, do you have any comments on the accessibility?
Si je peux apporter aussi un
If I
moment.
could just add something. You just bring your mic closer to your mouth, please. Thank you. Just an additional piece of information. I think that, unfortunately, there are lots of ways of accessing information for training institutes, which are actually not very well known, and they need to become better known. I'm not quite sure where we could centralize all of this information, but we need to be able to give information to low-cost information sources. This exists, and I think it needs to be more widely known. Sometimes there's a lack of information about information that allows you to access information. Thank you.
Chapter 1, and then we have 2 participants, Francois, and then after that, Stephen, to raise their questions. Thank you. Chan.
Allô?
Okay, then go ahead, Francois.
Okay, merci.
Thank you. Thank you for giving me the floor. First of all, I'd like to congratulate the different speakers. And I just wanted to say to my friends and colleagues from Central Africa, Claude and Elise, that online training will be very useful in terms of platforms where students can find material easily. But the question of practical training is still very important, particularly in the forestry sector. We need to do a lot of practical assignments, and that's the challenge. How can we include or continue to offer this practical training via the platforms? And so I think this is the key. We need to think about the practical assignment, contact, explanations. Would this end up being neglected if we work online? And I think with everything that you said, we have plenty of elements to think about. Thank you.
Claude, please go ahead and respond.
Sorry,
Ok.
Thomas.
C'est moi qui parle, je pense.
I think it's my turn to speak. So I wanted to say, similarly to what my colleague just mentioned, it's true that it's expensive and it's difficult to access infrastructure, this digital infrastructure. And it's impossible to complete the training without the practical assignments. So the digital tools are useful, but we do need in-person sessions for practical assignments. So the two are complementary and have to complement each other. There has to be an online component and an in-person component for the practical work.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Chen, I think you should be unmuted.
Oh, okay, thanks. Yes, it's a bit challenging when the host has to mute and unmute. Yeah, I won't respond to the question about sustainability because many others have already spoken about it. But one thing that we try to do in Traffic is that when we develop online training modules, we try to have analysis of the possible challenges that we'll be facing. You know, like you mentioned about, many mentioned about electricity and so on. But that is only one aspect of it. What we try to do is to ensure that we have alternatives built in place. Instead of giving live presentations by speakers, let's say, we can record the presentations and play it back, or we make sure that things are recorded so that others can review them at their leisure, basically. So there are things that we need to then have options where possible as we develop and design basically the training and the outputs that we've done. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chen. Okay, Stephen, please go ahead.
Thank you very much. My question is on this easy access presented by Jenny. We are saying the easy access is only by internet. That's very correct. But what about Austria? Internet connectivity is uncertain. What can we do?
Yeah, what can we do about the accessibility and infrastructure? I think, Elise, you had some points on that, all of them in the challenges. Maybe one of you want to respond? Just raise your hand and I can unmute. Okay. Go ahead, Elise. Sorry.
Merci.
Thank you. I agree. Which we've said this many times. We've talked about the access challenges. What was just added in the chat by Mr. Oriol is that if we have internet access, then we can follow this online training. But the the practical work will be an issue. And in Central African institution, this is already quite a challenge, just because of resources, logistics, equipment, and the skills of certain trainers and their technical skills. So, although online training is an excellent opportunity, particularly with the development of these networks and infrastructures, we really do have to think about when we use online training, for whom, at what moments, and how do we combine this with the practical work and the transmission of practical skills.
Thank you. Claude?
Yes. If there's no internet, we cannot eliminate traditional teaching methods, lectures in centers, but even in this migration towards a digital culture, some of the older generation of trainers have remained traditional in their way of teaching, and they continue as they've always have done, and they teach as they always have done. But the ideal thing would be to seize this opportunity, because we can give more lessons and in less time if we have the internet access, the infrastructure, etc.
Thank you, Claude. We have another hand risen. Jacqueline? Please go ahead.
Yes, hello. Thank you. I'm Jacqueline Lardy. I work also for the IBT, like Françoise, and together with Professor Kashaka in the project ADEFAC. What we also have to realize is that we don't only have to do with students. We also have many people that need training and that are working on a very technical, basic level in forestry companies and in industry. And so they need practical training, and they need simple tools, perhaps even small modules on telephones. Africa is the continent where the mobile telephone is just a huge development. It's compared to Europe or America whatsoever. We pay everything by telephone here and not by bank cards, because bank accounts are very expensive. And so perhaps some subjects, like the ones that traffic is educating, they can be modules that can be visualized on videos or whatsoever on mobile telephones, which can mean like additions to practical training on the ground. But it's practical training is essential here. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Jacqueline. I think mobile technology is another avenue that we can explore that partly addresses the question number 3 about the changes of technology on forestry learning in the forestry sector. Yesterday, we've learned that from one of the presenters, using what they call chatbots, a new sort of a job description called a conversation designer, where tools, mobile devices actually can be equipped with a more interactive means to engage learners in different types of learning settings on a mobile device. Before closing, we have another 5 minutes left, unless someone has raised his or her hand. But I can ask a question concerning the broad range of stakeholders your different projects want to be addressing, noticing like in Chan's presentation, the different stakeholders in the supply chain, or in Jenny's presentation, the range of learners from higher education, but also from the industry sector. My question would be, how can the technology used to address such a broad range of folks? And how is the instructional design process adapted that the learning material can be easily adjusted to fit the different types of stakeholders? Please, one of your presenters, can you address it? Maybe Jenny, you can start with the long history and the different stakeholders you have in your project. Thank you.
Yeah, as I mentioned, we have many different many different groups of users. So we have this general wide audience that we want to use this material to attract youngsters to find out information on forest industries and studies what you can do in the forestry and others. So that is we do collaboration with high schools. We organize visits to high schools and try to bring that way also information on our material, attract people to come. Then we, as I mentioned, we have this webinar series. Depending on the subject on these webinars, we have a bit different audience. For example, the introduction part that we will have in the beginning of next autumn, we have actually 2 sessions. One is in Finnish and one is in English, and the Finnish one is specially targeted in Finnish high school students to try to bring the information on the subject and on the digital learning environment. Then for the universities and companies who are also our really important tasks, we have like targeted, specially curated webinars for them, or just like Teams discussion sessions. So we describe the product to them, explain how you can use it in different situations. The need is totally different, of course, for universities and for companies. And as I mentioned, in companies, it's more like for newcomers to get an introduction on the industry. So we present different type methods on how this can be used and how this can be applied in their own what is it, like introductory sessions when they have newcomers. And for university students or university professionals, we have had a lot of professors creating the content, so they are already inside. They have created such material that they can be used in their education or their teaching, and that is really important. Of course, we also have colleagues on them and try to then bring this material closer to their practice and create it in a way that it is easily to adapt to their needs.
Okay, thank you, Jenny. That's, well, listening to you, it's try to having a very flexible approach so different stakeholders can be addressed. We learned yesterday in a presentation that one of the presenters was explaining using a topic-based approach where content can be packaged differently in different formats, but also for different audiences or languages. I think we have a minute left, and I'm not so sure about the technology. We may be cut off, or the recording maybe just stopped. Maybe just continue for now. Elise or Claude, do you have anything to address to this issue of different stakeholders, or Chan as part of the supply chain? Chan, let me just, okay. Okay. Chan, go ahead, please.
Okay, thanks. Right. This is also new to traffic in a way, because we are subject matter sort of experts, basically. No, we are not virtual trainers, experts, and so on. So we have to learn. But what we try to do is to work with the stakeholder groups, because in general, like the association, team association, they have their own dissemination mechanisms. You know, it depends on whichever groups, even the indigenous peoples, to like Red Truck in the Congo Basin, Rifiat, obviously. So it is possible, I think, to work with them using their platforms to ensure that we can reach out to them, because they are the ones who knows their stakeholder members the best, basically. So I think working in collaboration is very important, understanding the way they approach, what they can do and how we as an NGO especially can contribute to them, to provide that additional leverage, additional expansion scopes that is needed, right? So we will be slightly different, obviously, than what Jenny and Elisa and so on are doing. But at least like for you have some platforms that we can then help to contribute to reach out to your members, because the subject matter is also a critical issue, I think, in terms of ensuring that we can get the information out. And because the information is so wide, as I mentioned, right? So you can't reach out to everyone and you can't target everyone. So we have to be strategic as well. So we definitely need to work much more closely together. Thank you.
Thank you, Chen, and thank you for all the other presenters. I think we have reached the end of our session. Thank you all for participating, for very exciting presentations. Again, the presentations will be shared. We will capture the lessons learned. They will be fed into a report that should come out after the conference as a proceedings. I think we need to vacate the plenary room for the next session. Everyone stay safe, all the best, and thank you again for your participation. Bye-bye.